The stepmother kicked out the millionaire's daughter for forgetting to wash the dishes for the third time. Hard not to forget. The girl was overwhelmed with dozens of chores imposed on her. What no one expected was that the father, when returning to get his briefcase, heard the argument. Upon leaving, he saw backpacks on the floor and the daughter crying. In seconds, he understood everything. And in the next 2 minutes, he took an action that left the stepmother more regretful than ever. The stack of dishes in the white quartz sink looked like an insurmountable mountain to Lena, whose small shoulders already bore more weight than her 8 years should carry. The silence in the kitchen was dense, broken only by the distant whine of the lawn maintenance crew working the manor's vast estate. Every forgotten plate and silver utensil was a silent testament to her mistake. The second one, that same week, she knew what was coming next. The sound of stiletto heels echoing on the polished marble foyer announced the arrival of Victoria, her stepmother. The woman entered the kitchen with the posture of a queen inspecting her domain, her expensive perfume hanging in the air like a cold mist. Her icy blue eyes locked first onto the dishes, then onto Lena, who instinctively hunched her shoulders. For the second time this week, Lena. Victoria's voice was smooth, yet sharp as broken glass. It seems you struggle to remember your few simple duties. The two housekeepers, who were cleaning silver in the far corner of the kitchen, paused their work, their faces impassive, but their glances filled with a compassion they dared not express. Public humiliation was one of Victoria's favorite tools. "I'm sorry, Victoria. I was going to..." the girl started, her voice a thin, shaky thread. "I had to finish my homework and then tidy up all my toys. I was just about to do the dishes." "Excuses don't clean plates," her stepmother retorted, approaching and running a gloved finger over the countertop, as if searching for further faults. "In this home, we expect discipline. Your father, a man who built a fortune based on order and accountability, would be disappointed to see this laziness. He didn't become a multi-billionaire by signing deals and forgetting his promises, did he?" Lena dropped her head, feeling the hot tears forming at the corners of her eyes. The mention of her father was the worst part. Robert, her father, was a kind and good man, but perpetually distracted by his ventures, meetings about investments and the cash flow of his holding companies. He saw the world through profit spreadsheets and dividend reports, and he trusted Victoria implicitly to manage the household and consequently, Lena. To him, his wife was the epitome of perfection, an elegant woman who ran the manor with impeccable efficiency. He did not see the cracks beneath the polished surface, nor the way her eyes turned cold and opaque whenever she addressed his daughter. "I'm not lazy," Lena whispered, more to herself than to the woman in front of her. Victoria heard. She leaned down, her face dangerously close to Lena's, the forced smile never reaching her eyes. "Then prove it. But I'm warning you, child. This is the last time your negligence will be tolerated with a simple conversation. The next time a chore of yours is forgotten, there will be no forgiveness." The threat hung in the air, weighted with a consequence Lena couldn't fully grasp, but which made her tremble. Victoria straightened, adjusted her silk dress, and swept out of the kitchen with the same predatory grace with which she had entered, leaving Lena alone with the mountain of dishes and the echo of her words. The housekeepers silently resumed their work, not daring to look at the girl. Lena swallowed her sobs, picked up the sponge with trembling hands, and began washing the first plate. The cold water ran over her fingers, but couldn't extinguish the heat of shame on her face. She scrubbed the porcelain hard, as if she could erase the scene that had just occurred. But fear was already planted in her small heart, a chilling seed that promised to grow. What did Victoria mean by "there will be no forgiveness"? The uncertainty was a dark abyss before her, and she felt she was about to be pushed. That night, Lena's sleep was a tapestry of shadows and whispers. Victoria's threat echoed in her dreams, and she woke before dawn with her heart pounding uncontrollably in her chest. The luxury of her room, with pastel-colored walls and a princess canopy bed, felt like a gilded cage. The wealth surrounding her, the assets her father diligently accumulated, brought her no comfort. She knew, with the clarity only children possess, that love and security could not be bought with money or measured in dollars. It was in this moment of silent desperation that a spark of resilience ignited within her. She couldn't continue living under constant fear. She needed to reach her father. Somehow, the idea blossomed in her mind like a stubborn flower breaking through concrete, a letter. With the careful stealth of a spy in enemy territory, she slid out of bed, her bare feet barely making a sound on the Persian rug. The house was submerged in the early morning gloom. Her destination was the library, her father's sanctuary, an imposing room lined with books from floor to ceiling and the comforting scent of leather and aged paper. It was there Robert spent hours analyzing stock market charts, deciding on buying blue-chip stocks or selling off some cryptocurrency portfolio that, he claimed, was the future of capital. Lena didn't understand profitability or net worth, but she knew that in that room were the most important papers in the world to her father. Perhaps, if her message was among them, he would finally see it. She found stationery bearing the family crest and a fountain pen her father used to sign major contracts. Sitting in the enormous leather armchair that swallowed her whole, she began to write. Her words were simple, direct, born of the purest anguish. "Daddy, please help me. Victoria is not who you think she is. She is mean to me when you are gone. She scares me." Each letter was a small cry for help. She folded the paper carefully, her heart filled with fragile hope, and hid it inside a thick book on investment strategy that she knew her father would consult soon. She felt a momentary relief, the sensation of having taken a step, however small, out of the darkness. The relief, however, was short-lived. As she turned to leave the library, her body froze. Victoria was standing in the doorway, a crimson silk dressing gown enveloping her slender body. Her arms were crossed, and a thin, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips. She said nothing, only walked slowly to the bookshelf, her eyes never leaving Lena's. With terrifying precision, she picked up the exact book where the letter was hidden. She opened it and removed the folded paper. Lena held her breath, the silence in the room becoming deafening. Victoria read the letter, her expression remaining neutral, which was even more terrifying than anger. When she finished, she looked at the girl, trying to stir up trouble. "Lena, inventing little lies to get attention, that is very naughty." Her voice was a calm, poisonous murmur. And then, with a deliberate and cruel motion, she tore the letter, first in half, then into quarters, then into tiny pieces that fluttered to the floor like dirty snow. "Children who lie need to learn a lesson," she said, her eyes shining with cold triumph. "And don't worry, dear. I will make sure your father knows about your attempt to separate us. But he will hear my version of the story." The days following the destruction of the letter were a masterclass in silent cruelty. Victoria did not shout or reprimand her in front of Robert. On the contrary, she treated her with an artificial sweetness that was more chilling than any scream. She offered to help with homework, praised her drawings with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and, in every gesture, wove a web of perfection that made Lena's truth even more unbelievable. Lena felt like a character in a macabre play, forced to perform the role of the happy stepdaughter while her soul screamed for help. The manor, with all its opulence and the vast assets it represented, had become a stage for Victoria's performance, and Lena was the only one in the audience who knew the true nature of the lead actress. On Friday evening, the performance reached its peak. The Harringtons, longtime neighbors and keen observers of others' lives, were invited for dinner. The dining room table was set with surgical precision. Silver cutlery gleamed under the light of a crystal chandelier, and the aroma of roast filled the air. Robert, in his best mood, spoke animatedly about the stock market. "My tech investments are seeing spectacular returns," he told Mr. Harrington, gesturing with a wine glass. "Dividends this quarter exceeded all expectations. You have to know where to deploy capital to see your fortune grow." Lena ate in silence, pushing food around on her plate. She felt Mrs. Harrington's eyes on her, curious and analytical. Victoria, noticing the girl's discomfort, chose that moment to strike. With a radiant smile, she turned to the neighbor. "Our Lena is growing up so fast. She's already learning to take on responsibilities around the house," she said, with a tone of maternal pride. "Of course. Sometimes her imagination is more interesting than practical chores. Isn't that right, darling? Sometimes doing the dishes seems like a bigger challenge than managing a king's ransom." The comment was subtle, almost harmless to inattentive ears. But to Lena, it was like a slap in the face. The mention of the dishes, the insinuation that she lived in a world of imagination, was a way of calling her lazy and a liar in front of everyone. She looked at her father, a desperate plea in her eyes, hoping he would defend her, that he would notice the hidden barb in the sweet words. But Robert only laughed, a loud, genuine laugh that shattered Lena's heart into 1,000 pieces. "That's how character is built," he said, giving Victoria a fond pat on the shoulder. "Let her dream, my love. With your guidance, she'll soon be ready to manage her own estate." Lena's world collapsed in that instant. Her father's laughter was the final confirmation of her loneliness. He didn't see, he didn't understand. To him, it was just an innocent joke, light dinner conversation. To her, it was abandonment. The food lost its taste, and the voices around her became an indistinct buzz. She felt completely invisible, a small ghost sitting at her own dinner table. Later, after the neighbors left, the emotional exhaustion weighed heavily on her, but persistence, that small flame that refused to be extinguished, compelled her to try one last time. She needed to speak to him without Victoria's presence. She climbed the stairs silently and walked toward her parents' master suite. The door was ajar, and she could hear voices inside. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the gold doorknob. That's when she heard Victoria's voice, soft and full of false concern. "Robert, darling, I'm worried about Lena. She tried to give me a letter today, full of stories, saying I mistreat her. I know it's just a phase, a way to seek attention, but my heart aches to think she feels this way." Lena's heart stopped. She heard her father's intake of breath, a pause loaded with surprise, followed by a weary sigh. "A letter saying you mistreat her? Victoria, that's absurd. You are the best thing that has happened to both of us." His voice was firm, filled with the unwavering conviction of a man who believes he has all the facts. "She's probably jealous. It's normal. I'll talk to her tomorrow. I'll explain that we need to be a united family. Don't worry, my love." Lena backed away from the door as if she had touched fire. Victoria's manipulation had been masterful. She had not only destroyed the letter, but used its content to paint herself as the victim, reinforcing the image of a dedicated, misunderstood stepmother. Anything Lena said now would sound like the tantrum of a jealous child. Defeat was bitter, and the dark hallway of the manor seemed to swallow her. The next day, the retaliation came, disguised as discipline. Victoria woke her earlier than usual, with a list of chores that would make an adult groan. In addition to her normal duties, she now had to help polish the silver, organize the library books by color, and sweep dry leaves from the veranda. "Since you have so much free time to write imaginary stories, I thought a little extra work would help you focus on reality," Victoria said with a satisfied smile, handing the list to Lena at breakfast. Robert, sitting at the head of the table reading stock quotes on his tablet, merely nodded. Excellent idea, dear. Discipline is essential. That's how I turned my first investment into a multi-million-dollar business. Lena worked all day, her small hands aching and her body exhausted. Every task was a reminder of her powerlessness. While dusting the books in the library, her eyes scanned titles on capital markets, Bitcoin and gold. Words her father used so often. He understood the complexity of managing a fortune, of balancing assets and liabilities, but seemed incapable of deciphering the simple equation of his own daughter's suffering. The love he felt for her was real, she knew, but it was buried under layers of blind trust and distraction. At bedtime, her father came into her room. He sat on the edge of the bed, his face softened by the lamplight. The scent of his expensive cologne and Cuban cigars filled the air. "Lena, Victoria told me about the letter," he began, his voice gentle, but with a tone of reprimand. "I know it can be hard sometimes, but she loves you very much, and she only wants what's best for you. Making up stories about her, that's not fair. We are a family." He stroked her hair, the gesture that once comforted her now feeling hollow. Lena looked at him, her throat tight, the words trapped. How could she explain? How could she fight against the perfect narrative Victoria had created? Telling the truth now would only confirm the accusation that she was a lying child. So she did the only thing she could. She nodded, a silent tear running down her face and disappearing into the silk pillowcase. "I know, Daddy. I'm sorry." Robert smiled, relieved. For him, the matter was settled. A small family crisis, resolved with a sensible conversation. He kissed her forehead and left, leaving the door ajar. Lena stayed there in the dark, listening to his steps fade away. She had tried to ask for help, but each attempt only sank her further. The half-open door was not an invitation to light, but a crack through which the monster could observe. And from the other side of the hallway, she could feel Victoria's presence, listening, savoring her victory. The child understood with painful clarity that with every step she took to save herself, Victoria's noose tightened around her neck. The first week drew to a close, but to Lena, it felt like an eternity of fear and frustration had passed. The second week began with news that, in other circumstances, would have saddened her, but now filled her with icy dread. During Monday breakfast, Robert announced he needed to take an unexpected business trip. A major investment opportunity arose in Singapore, something big involving crypto and international funds, he explained, his eyes shining with the excitement of a new financial challenge. "It'll only be 4 days. Victoria will handle everything here. I have complete confidence in her ability to manage our assets and our home." Lena nearly choked on her orange juice. 4 days, alone with Victoria, without even the distracted presence of her father as a protective barrier. The manor, which had already become a prison, would now turn into territory completely dominated by her tormentor. She looked at Victoria, who maintained an expression of dedicated, understanding wife. "Of course, my love. Go and take care of your business. Don't worry about us. Lena and I will get along just fine, won't we, darling?" she said, giving the girl a sharp look over the rim of her porcelain cup. Lena simply nodded, her stomach churning. The goodbye in the entry hall was quick. Robert, his mind already focused on mergers and acquisitions, gave his daughter a hurried kiss on the forehead. "Behave and listen to Victoria. She knows what's best for you." The words were meant to be comforting, but sounded like a sentence. As soon as the massive oak door closed and the sound of her father's car disappeared down the gravel drive, the atmosphere in the house changed. Victoria's mask dropped, replaced by an expression of cold triumph. "Now it's just the two of us," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "And the rules are mine." The following days were a blur of endless chores and constant surveillance. Victoria seemed to find fault in everything Lena did. The dust she missed, the way she made the bed, the time it took her to finish her meals. Every small slip was punished with more work or with biting comments that eroded her self-esteem. Lena moved through the house like a frightened mouse, always looking over her shoulder, trying to become as invisible as possible. She felt exhausted, not just physically but emotionally. The hope that her father might somehow perceive the truth was thousands of miles away, on the other side of the world. On Wednesday night, the inevitable happened. After a particularly exhausting day, which included helping the gardener rake the leaves off the immense front lawn, Lena was at her breaking point. She ate the meal served to her, cleared her plate, and, overcome by fatigue, went upstairs to her room and fell asleep almost instantly. She forgot, for the third time, the stack of dinner dishes, the same ones that had started this entire nightmare, remained untouched in the kitchen sink. She was awakened the next morning not by the sun, but by her bedroom door slamming open. Victoria stood there, her face a mask of contained fury. In her hand, she held a small travel bag, one Lena used for weekends at her grandparents' house. "I warned you," Victoria said, her voice low and hissing. "I said there would be no forgiveness. You didn't listen to me. You don't respect me. And in this house, those who don't respect the rules do not deserve to live under my roof." Lena sat up in bed, the sleep draining away to be replaced by paralyzing terror. "No, Victoria, please. I was so tired. I forgot." "Tiredness is no excuse for disobedience," the stepmother retorted, throwing the empty bag onto the bed. "Pack your things, only the essentials. You will learn, the hard way, what responsibility means." Tears streamed down Lena's face as she, in a trance, put a few articles of clothing and her battered teddy bear into the bag. She couldn't believe this was happening. Was she being expelled from her own home for forgetting to wash the dishes? The cruelty of the situation was so absurd, it felt like a nightmare. But Victoria's unrelenting glare was real. And when the stepmother grabbed her arm and pulled her out of the room, down the stairs and toward the front door, Lena knew the nightmare had only just begun. What would happen to her now? Where would she go? Fear was a knot in her throat, choking her sobs. Thursday morning's light never seemed so cruel. It streamed through the large windows of the entryway, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and highlighting every detail of the desolate scene. Lena, her face swollen from crying, gripped the handle of her small, improvised bag so tightly her knuckles were white. Outside, the world continued as if nothing were wrong. Birds sang, the mail carrier passed on the street, and the familiar sound of the neighbor's lawnmower filled the air. But inside that manor, Lena's world was being turned upside down. "Please, Victoria, don't do this," she pleaded, her voice hoarse and desperate. "I promise I'll never forget again. I'll do whatever you want. Please." Victoria, however, seemed made of stone. She opened the heavy front door, revealing the drive that led to the wrought iron gate. "Promises are useless without actions to back them up. You had your chances, Lena. Now you will experience the consequences. Perhaps a little time outside will teach you to value the comfort and rules of this house." She gestured with her head toward the exit, a silent, irrefutable command. Lena was pushed out, stumbling on the marble step. The sun blinded her for a moment. She turned, tears streaming freely, and saw Victoria's figure in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the light of the house's interior. "Where am I supposed to go?" the girl asked, panic seizing her voice. "That is not my problem," the stepmother replied, contempt evident in her tone. "Perhaps one of your imaginary friends can help you." And with those final words, the door closed with a definitive click, the sound echoing like a sentence of exile. Lena stood on the cobblestone drive, the morning sun warming her shoulders, but feeling a coldness that came from within. The manor gate, a few feet away, looked as imposing as the walls of a fortress. She was outside, alone. The neighborhood was familiar, but suddenly seemed a strange and hostile place. The large homes, with their perfect lawns and windows that looked like eyes, watched her in silence. Shame consumed her. What would the Harringtons think if they saw her there, bag in hand, like a small outcast? She sat on the curb, hugging her worn teddy bear as if it were the only real thing she had left. Tears came in waves, sobs that shook her small body. She didn't know what to do. Call her father. He was in Singapore, across the world, probably in a meeting about interest rates and cash flow. Would he believe her? Or would he believe Victoria's version, which was undoubtedly already being carefully prepared? As despair enveloped her, a sleek black luxury sedan, identical to her father's, turned the corner and slowed as it approached the manor. Lena paid little attention, absorbed in her own misery. The car, however, did not enter the gate. Instead, it stopped across the street, partially hidden by a large, blossoming magnolia tree. The driver's window, made of tinted glass, lowered just a few inches. From inside the vehicle, Robert watched the scene. He had returned early. A crucial portfolio containing documents on his family trust and important financial applications had been forgotten in his home office. His flight had been rebooked for the evening. He was about to step out of the car and surprise everyone with his unexpected return when he saw the front door open. And then he watched, paralyzed, a scene his brain refused to process. His wife, the woman he trusted implicitly, expelling his 8-year-old daughter from the house. He saw Lena's tears, heard her desperate pleas, even if muffled by the distance, and he saw the door slam in her face. A whirlwind of emotions hit him. Shock, confusion, and a cold. Deep rage he rarely felt. Every word Lena had tried to tell him, every pleading look he had ignored, every piece of the puzzle that didn't make sense now clicked into place with terrifying clarity. He was about to get out of the car, cross the street, and confront Victoria with the fury of a betrayed father. But something stopped him, an instinct, a sudden need to understand the depth of this abyss. If Victoria was capable of that, what else was she capable of when he wasn't looking? The rage gave way to icy determination. Confronting her now would give her a chance to explain herself, to manipulate the situation once more. No, he would not intervene. Not yet. He needed to see more. He needed the complete truth, no matter how ugly. And for that, he would have to become a ghost in his own house. The car engine shut off, but Robert remained motionless, his hands still on the wheel, his knuckles white. The adrenaline that urged him to act was replaced by a calculating coldness. He watched his daughter, a tiny, helpless figure sitting on the curb, and felt a searing pain in his chest. It was a new pain, mixed with the overwhelming guilt of his own blindness. How could he not have seen? How could he have been so naive, so absorbed in his businesses and the incessant quest to increase his net worth, that he neglected his greatest asset? Victoria's words, her sweet assurances and her false concerns now sounded like venom in his memory. He had been tricked, manipulated by a master. The plan formed in his mind not as an act of revenge, but of justice. An explosion of anger now would be useless. It would result in denials, crocodile tears, and perhaps even a twist where he ended up feeling guilty. Victoria was cunning. To unmask her, he would need more than the scene he had just witnessed. He would need irrefutable proof, a pattern of behavior that couldn't be denied. He needed to see what happened behind closed doors, to hear what was said when she believed she was alone with Lena. The decision was made. He would not confront Victoria. He would pretend nothing had happened. He grabbed his cell phone and called the family's personal driver, a trusted man who had been with him for over a decade. "Marcus, I need a favor. Discreetly. I'm near the house, but I don't want to be seen." Minutes later, Marcus arrived in a different car. Robert explained the situation in a low, tense voice. "I need you to pick up Lena. Tell her I asked you to take her to your sister's house for a few hours. Say it's a surprise. Do not mention that I am here. No one can know I've returned." Marcus, a man of few words but unwavering loyalty, nodded with a serious face. He approached Lena, who looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Little Lena, your father called me. He set up a surprise for you. We're going for a ride." The confusion on the girl's face was palpable, but the mention of her father was enough for her to follow him, dragging her small bag. Robert watched from the car until they disappeared around the corner. The relief of knowing she was safe mingled with the anguish of what was to come. Then he acted. He called Victoria from his cell phone. "Honey, I'm at the airport. I misplaced the portfolio with the investment fund documents. Can you believe it? I'll have to take the evening flight. I'll be home in about an hour to grab it." His voice was calm, casual, that of a busy husband slightly frustrated with his own forgetfulness. "Oh, my love, what a shame. Of course, come and get it. I'll be waiting for you. The house is in perfect order, as always." Her voice on the other end of the line was the epitome of tranquility and efficiency. Her lie hit him like a punch. "The house is in perfect order." The audacity was breathtaking. He hung up the phone, his heart pounding. The game had begun. He entered his own house through the back entrance, using a key no one knew he possessed. He moved with the silence of a thief, going up to his office. He grabbed the portfolio he had used as an excuse and then called a security company that provided services for his businesses. The order was clear and urgent. Install a discreet surveillance system in the house, cameras and microphones small enough to be invisible, in the main rooms, the kitchen, the living room, the library, and the upstairs hallway. They needed to be installed that afternoon, while Victoria was out at her standing appointment at the high-end salon. The plan was risky, but the truth was worth any price. He was no longer just protecting his daughter, he was unearthing a betrayal that hid in the heart of his home. When Robert entered through the front door an hour later, he found Victoria waiting for him in the hall, a radiant smile on her face. "Darling, it's good to see you, even if it's so quick." She hugged him, the gesture so natural and affectionate that, for a second, he almost doubted what he had seen. But the image of Lena, small and tearful on the curb, was seared into his mind. He returned the hug with a stiffness he hoped went unnoticed. It was a silly setback. "But these documents, they're worth a fortune." "Where is Lena?" he asked, as casually as he could manage, as he climbed the stairs toward the office. "Oh, she's in time out in her room," Victoria replied, following him. The lie flowed with terrifying ease. "She was a bit stubborn today, refused to do her chores. I thought some alone time to reflect would do her good. Children need boundaries, don't they?" Robert merely murmured in agreement, his stomach churning. He picked up the portfolio from his desk and turned to her. "You're right, as always. I trust your judgment. I have to go, or I'll miss the other flight." He kissed her on the cheek, the contact of her cold skin repelling him, and left. From the car, he observed the house for a few moments. It was his castle, the symbol of his success, of all his hard-earned net worth, but inside, it was rotten. Meanwhile, Lena was at Marcus's sister's house, a kind, cheerful woman who gave her chocolate chip cookies and let her watch cartoons on television. The girl was confused, but the woman's kindness was a balm to her wounded soul. Her father's surprise was still a mystery, but for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Away from Victoria's watchful eyes, she could breathe. The security team arrived at the manor in the early afternoon, disguised as an internet maintenance crew. Victoria, who had already left for her weekly beauty appointment, suspected nothing. In less than 2 hours, the house was equipped with invisible eyes and ears. Robert supervised everything remotely, through his cell phone, feeling like a stranger in his own life. When Victoria returned in the late afternoon, the house was exactly as she had left it, silent and impeccable. That night, Marcus drove Lena back home. Robert's instructions were precise. Tell her the surprise was just a fun day out, and that now she needs to return. Ask her not to tell Victoria, so it doesn't look like she broke her time out. When Lena walked in, Victoria was waiting. "Where were you?" she asked, her eyes narrowed. Lena, remembering the instructions, lowered her head. I snuck out the back window. I went to the park. But I came back. The answer seemed to satisfy Victoria, who saw it as further proof of the girl's rebelliousness. At least you had the decency to return. Now go upstairs. Your timeout continues, and tomorrow your chores will be doubled for disobeying me. Lena went up to her room without a word. Later that night, Victoria entered the girl's bedroom. The camera, hidden in a discreet smoke detector, recorded everything. "Your father called," she said, her voice a threatening whisper. "He's coming back in 3 days. If I were you, I'd behave perfectly. He's already disappointed in your attitude. One wrong step, one word out of place, and you might convince him that a boarding school in Switzerland would be the best place for such a troubled girl. And you know how much your father values good investments in education, don't you?" Far away, in a hotel room, Robert watched the scene on his laptop. The audio crystal clear. The threat, the manipulation, the way Victoria used his love as a weapon against his own daughter. The rage he felt was cold and sharp as a blade. Every word from Victoria was another nail in his own coffin. He watched the woman leave the room and his daughter shrink into the bed. The truth was beginning to emerge, and it was uglier and crueler than he could ever have imagined. The waiting game he was playing was torturous, but he knew it was the only way. He needed to let Victoria's web of lies grow large enough for her to ensnare herself in it, irrevocably. The next 3 days were a silent agony for Robert and a lesson in hypocrisy for Lena. From his hotel room in Singapore, Robert became a phantom spectator of his own life. He barely slept, spending hours with headphones on, watching the live streams from the hidden cameras. The world of business, with its discussions about the stock market and fund profitability, seemed distant and insignificant. The real drama, the most important investment of his life, was unfolding inside the walls of his home. He saw Victoria move through the manor with impeccable grace, taking calls from friends, planning menus with the cook, acting as the perfect billionaire's wife. But when she was alone with Lena, the mask fell. He heard her reprimand his daughter for spilling a drop of milk on the tablecloth, calling her clumsy and useless. He saw her inspect Lena's chores with a critical eye, always finding a flaw, an excuse to humiliate her. "Do you think your father built this fortune by being mediocre? He demands perfection in everything, and you are a constant disappointment." The words were small daggers, designed to wound and undermine the child's confidence. The worst was the psychological manipulation. Victoria frequently spoke of Robert, twisting his image to suit her purposes. "Your father is very stressed with his business. The last thing he needs is to come home and find problems. An obedient, silent daughter is the greatest gift you can give him. Do you want to be a burden or a present?" Meanwhile, Lena, caught in the web of confusion, desperately tried to be the perfect daughter. The threat of boarding school terrified her. The idea of being sent far from her father, from everything she knew, was a fate worse than any punishment. So she tried harder. She cleaned meticulously, spoke only when spoken to, and avoided Victoria's gaze at all costs. But fear and sadness consumed her inside. She felt increasingly confused. Victoria sounded so convincing when talking about her father's love and expectations that sometimes Lena almost believed the fault really was hers. Perhaps she was, in fact, a disappointment. One afternoon, Lena was in the garden, collecting faded blooms from the rose bushes, a chore Victoria had given her. Mr. Harrington, the neighbor, was in his own yard, across the hedge. He had been watching her for a few minutes. His wrinkled face set in an expression of concern. "Everything all right over there, little Lena?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lena jumped, startled to be noticed. "Yes, sir. I'm fine." "Are you sure? You look sad. And last week, I saw you crying out here near the gate. Did something happen?" The question was innocent, born of genuine neighborly concern. Before Lena could answer, Victoria appeared on the veranda. "Lena, what are you doing standing around? We have a lot to do before your father arrives tomorrow." Her voice was cheerful, but there was a clear warning in her eyes. She smiled at the neighbor. "Hello, Albert. We were just tending the garden. Lena is such a great helper." Mr. Harrington smiled back, but his eyes remained thoughtful. Lena simply lowered her head and returned to the roses, her heart pounding. The brief moment of human connection, the possibility of being seen, was quickly crushed by her stepmother's watchful presence. Robert, watching everything on the laptop, felt a lump in his throat. The neighbor's mention of seeing Lena crying at the gate was external confirmation that the cruelty he had witnessed was not an isolated event. It was a pattern of emotional abuse hidden behind a facade of luxury and normalcy. He saved that clip of the recording, just as he saved all the others. The proof was accumulating, forming a mountain of evidence as solid as his financial empire. The time for reckoning was drawing closer. He bought his ticket back, no longer as a hurried husband, but as a judge about to deliver his verdict. The day of Robert's return was orchestrated by Victoria like the premiere of a play. The house sparkled, the aroma of freshly baked bread wafted from the kitchen, and an arrangement of white lilies, Robert's favorite flowers, adorned the hall table. Lena received precise instructions: wear her best dress, smile, and hug her father as soon as he entered. "Remember, Lena, the peace of this house depends on your attitude," Victoria whispered, gripping her shoulder a little too tightly. "He needs to see a happy, harmonious family. Don't disappoint him." When Robert finally walked through the door, he played his role with a perfection that rivaled his wife's. He smiled, opened his arms, and hugged Victoria, then knelt to hug Lena. He held her for an extra moment, inhaling the scent of childhood in her hair and feeling the fragility of her small body in his arms. The urge to expose everything right there at that instant was immense, but he restrained himself. The stage for the final reveal needed to be far more impactful. "What a wonderful welcome," he said, his voice sounding genuinely happy. "There's nothing like coming home." During dinner, he spoke about his business in Singapore, the success of a new investment fund, and how the net worth of his companies had grown. He painted a picture of success and stability, which made Victoria relax. She believed he was, as always, absorbed in the world of profits and dividends, blind to the subtle currents running beneath the surface of his domestic life. "To celebrate my return and the success of the business, I want to host a dinner party," Robert announced suddenly, catching Victoria by surprise. "This Saturday, I want to invite our most important partners and a few friends, like the Harringtons. It will be a special evening." Victoria's face lit up. Social dinners were her preferred stage, an opportunity to display her status as the elegant, competent wife of a powerful man. It was her chance to reinforce the image of perfection she so cultivated. What a wonderful idea. "Oh, darling, I'll take care of everything. It will be an unforgettable night." In the days that followed, the manor was a whirlwind of activity. Victoria plunged headlong into preparations, hiring the best caterers, choosing the menu, and deciding on the decor. Robert watched her, feigning casual interest, while secretly preparing his own scenario. He met with Mr. Harrington during a morning walk in the neighborhood. "Albert, I need to ask you something, and I ask for your discretion," Robert began, his tone serious. "You mentioned seeing Lena crying at the gate the other day. Has that happened before?" The neighbor hesitated, his gaze troubled. "Robert, I don't want to interfere, but yes, I've seen her a few times, sitting on the curb, looking very unhappy. I always presumed it was some child's spat, but thank you." Saturday night arrived, enveloping the manor in a cloak of velvety darkness, punctuated by the golden lights emanating from every window. Luxury cars slid silently up the gravel drive, dropping off elegant guests at the entrance. The house was stunning. Victoria, wearing an evening gown that seemed woven with threads of gold, was the perfect hostess, floating among the guests with a smile and a kind word for everyone. She felt at the height of her power, the center of attention, the undisputed queen of that castle of wealth and influence. Robert, by her side, seemed the proud husband, shaking hands, discussing the stock market and the latest euro valuation, but his eyes, cold and calculating, registered every detail. Lena, in her party dress, felt like a small accessory in Victoria's grand production. She had been instructed to greet the guests politely and then retreat to a discreet corner of the living room. "Adults need to discuss business, dear. Things you wouldn't understand," her stepmother had said. But from her secluded armchair, Lena observed everything. She saw the smiles, heard fragments of conversations about interest rates, portfolio applications, and inheritances, and felt the tension her father exuded, an almost invisible energy that only she, with her heightened sensitivity, could perceive. The first part of the evening went perfectly, exactly as Victoria planned. Guests praised the food, the decor, the hospitality. She reveled in the compliments, feeling like the personification of success. Her marriage to Robert was not just an emotional bond, it was the biggest business deal of her life. And she managed it with the same shrewdness he managed his investment funds. The weakened bond between father and daughter was, to her, merely the removal of a liability, ensuring her position and her access to the family's vast net worth remained uncontested. As dinner was about to be served in the main dining room, Robert stood up, lightly tapping his crystal glass with a utensil. The clear sound silenced the conversation. All eyes turned to him. Victoria smiled, expecting a toast, perhaps a public compliment to his wonderful wife. "Friends, partners, thank you all for coming tonight," Robert began, his voice calm and firm, echoing through the room. "I gathered you here, not just to celebrate the success of our ventures, but to share something much more personal. Something about the true value of our net worth, about the wealth that truly matters." He paused, and a slight murmur went through the room. The speech was taking an unexpected turn. Victoria looked at him, a wrinkle of confusion forming between her perfectly arched eyebrows. "For the past few years, I've dedicated myself to building an empire," Robert continued, his eyes sweeping across the guests' faces before resting, for an instant, on Lena. "I accumulated capital, invested in stocks, gold, even crypto, but while I was focused on increasing my assets, I failed to protect the most valuable one of all." The silence now was absolute, heavy with anticipation. Robert gave a discreet signal to a man standing near the fireplace. The man, a technician posing as a guest, pressed a button on a remote control. Above the fireplace, a large television screen, which until then had displayed a piece of digital art, flickered and came to life. The first image that appeared, crystal clear and in high definition, was of the kitchen. Victoria's voice, cold and cutting, filled the room. "Excuses don't clean plates. The next time a chore of yours is forgotten, there will be no forgiveness." Victoria's smile froze on her face. Her blood ran cold. She looked at the screen, then at Robert, panic beginning to rise in her throat, like bitter bile. The entire room held its breath. Victoria's play had just had its curtain ripped down, and what was about to be revealed on stage was a drama far darker and real than any of the guests could have imagined. The dining room, previously filled with lively conversation and laughter, plunged into a sepulchral silence. The only sound was Victoria's voice emanating from the speakers, cruel and devoid of any affection. On the screen, scenes followed one another like a filmed nightmare. First, the kitchen and the veiled threat, then the library, with Victoria tearing Lena's small letter to shreds, the sound of the paper tearing echoing painfully in the room. Next, the conversation in the bedroom, with the stepmother planting the seed of fear about a Swiss boarding school. Each clip was a blow, delivered with surgical precision. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their gazes alternating between the shocking screen and Victoria's face, which paled with every second, the color draining from her skin until she resembled a marble statue. The final sequence was the most devastating. The external camera, positioned discreetly by the entrance, showed Victoria pushing Lena out the front door. The image of the girl, small and helpless with her bag, pleading as the door closed, was a punch to the collective gut. The sound of Lena's sobs, captured with agonizing clarity, hung in the air. The humiliation was no longer private, confined to the walls of that manor. It was there, exposed for all to see. The partners whose opinions Victoria so valued, the neighbors whose judgment she feared. Her mask of perfection did not just fall. It was shattered into 1,000 pieces. When the screen finally went black, the silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. Robert remained standing, his face a mask of pain and determination. He didn't need to say anything. The images spoke for themselves. Victoria, recovering from the initial shock, desperately tried to save the situation. She stood up, her hands trembling, and forced a fragile, shrill laugh. "Robert, what kind of sick joke is this? This is absurd. Those are clips taken out of context. I was just educating her, disciplining her. Children need firmness. You're all parents. You know how it is." Her voice, usually so controlled and melodious, was high-pitched and shaky. She looked around, searching for a friendly face, a look of understanding, but found only expressions of shock, pity, and disdain. Mrs. Harrington slowly shook her head, her lips pursed in disapproval. Robert's partners avoided her gaze, embarrassed. It was then that Robert spoke, his voice low, but carrying a weight that silenced Victoria's pathetic attempt at defense. "Discipline does not humiliate. Victoria, education does not terrorize, and love does not throw an 8-year-old child out of the house for forgetting to wash the dishes." He walked to the other side of the room, where Lena was sitting, curled up in the armchair, her eyes wide, fixed on the scene. She trembled not from fear, but from an overwhelming mixture of validation and relief. Finally, someone saw her. Finally, the truth, her truth, was being told. Robert knelt down in front of her, completely ignoring the rest of the room. He took her small, cold hands in his. "Lena, I am so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am sorry I didn't see, for not listening, for not protecting you. I failed as a father, and I will spend the rest of my life making it right." The tears Lena had been holding back finally overflowed, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. Her father was there, not the distracted millionaire, but her father, the man she loved, and he was fighting for her. Victoria watched the scene, the reality of her defeat crashing down on her like an avalanche. She hadn't just lost an argument. She had lost everything: the respect, the admiration, the control. The net worth she so coveted was suddenly out of reach. Public humiliation. The weapon she had used so skillfully against a defenseless child had turned against her with devastating force. In that luxurious ballroom, surrounded by all the wealth that once represented her triumph, Victoria was completely and irremediably ruined. The dinner, meant to be a celebration of success, ended in a silent, embarrassed exodus. The guests, one by one, took their leave with nods and hurried murmurs, anxious to escape the heavy, emotionally charged atmosphere. No one looked at Victoria. She remained standing in the middle of the empty dining room, a solitary and diminished figure amidst the luxury that now seemed to mock her. The untouched food cooled on the table, and the flower arrangement seemed to wilt before her eyes. The silence that settled was not of peace, but of annihilation. Robert took Lena to the library, the sanctuary that had once been the scene of so much fear for her. and transformed it into a refuge. He sat her in the large leather armchair, wrapped her in a cashmere blanket, and sat on the floor at her feet, placing himself on a level below her, an unconscious gesture of submission and apology. For the first time, there was no rush in his voice, no mention of business or cash flow. There was only the complete and total presence of a father for his daughter. "We'll talk, Lena, about everything," he said softly, "but not tonight. Tonight, I just want you to know you're safe. Nothing and no one will ever hurt you in this house again. I give you my word." Later, when Lena was already asleep in her room, exhausted but with a serenity on her face that he hadn't seen in a long time, Robert confronted Victoria. She was sitting in the living room, her makeup smudged by silent tears of anger and self-pity. "How could you?" he asked, his voice devoid of fury, which made it even scarier. It was the icy calm of an irrevocable decision. "I loved her, Robert. I love you," she tried, her voice weak. "I just wanted us to be a perfect family. She resented me from the start." "No," he interrupted, his gaze firm. "Don't blame her. I saw the tapes, Victoria. All of them. I saw the deliberate cruelty, the constant manipulation. You didn't want a family. You wanted control. You wanted unrestricted access to my fortune. And you saw my daughter as an obstacle, an asset that needed to be devalued." His words, using the language of business they both understood so well, hit her with the force of a slap. He saw through her to her deepest motivations. "What happens now?" she whispered, the fear of uncertainty replacing the arrogance. "For now, you will pack your bags and move to our city apartment," he declared. "Tomorrow, my lawyers will contact yours. We will discuss the terms of our separation. All your access to company accounts, your credit cards, everything will be suspended. You will have an allowance, enough to live comfortably, but access to my net worth, the power you so craved, is over." For Victoria, this was a punishment worse than any other. It wasn't just the loss of money, but the loss of status, of power, of the image she had so carefully built. She would be just another divorced woman, stripped of the glamour that Robert's name and wealth afforded her. His justice was not impulsive. It was calculated to hit her where it hurt the most. In the days that followed, the manor underwent a transformation. Victoria's oppressive presence disappeared, and with it, the fear that permeated the walls. Robert cancelled all his non-essential meetings. He started spending mornings helping Lena with her homework, discovering with a pang of shame that she was brilliant at math but struggled with reading. He listened to her. He prepared breakfast, and they ate together at the small kitchen nook table, not the imposing dining room. Slowly, Lena's trust began to blossom. She was still cautious, like an animal that has been wounded and is slow to accept a caress. But, for the first time, she began to tell him about her school day, about her friends, about her dreams. And he listened to every word as if it were the most important dividend report in the world. The healing process had begun, not with a grand gesture, but with the patient, daily rebuilding of the bonds that had almost been permanently severed. 3 weeks after the fateful dinner, the neighborhood was preparing for its annual community spring fair, an event that had always been a fixture on the city's social calendar. In the past, for Lena, the fair was a source of anxiety, another opportunity for Victoria to display her as a well-behaved accessory while subtly distilling her criticisms. This year, however, something was different. The morning air smelled of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, and for the first time, the scent carried a promise of joy, not apprehension. Robert spent the morning with Lena in the garden, not giving orders, but working alongside her, getting his hands dirty as they planted a small patch of daisies. He learned that she liked the way the white petals looked like small suns, and that the color yellow made her happy. These were small details, insignificant to the billionaire who traded in euros and dollars, but which now constituted the most precious treasure he possessed. The reconstruction of their relationship was being cultivated there among the flowers, in simple gestures and unhurried conversations. He didn't need stocks or investments to see the profitability of that time. The profit was in the shine returning to his daughter's eyes. When the afternoon came and the music of the fair began to float through the air, Robert held Lena's hand. "Ready to go?" he asked. She looked at him, a shadow of hesitation on her face. Facing the curious stares of the neighbors, the people who had witnessed her family's humiliation, frightened her. Robert seemed to understand her thoughts. He knelt down in front of her, as he had on the night of the revelation. "We'll go together, and we don't need to hide from anything. The truth is on our side, and today, the only thing people need to see is how much your dad loves you." His words, firm and full of conviction, gave her the courage she needed. She squeezed his hand and nodded, a small but genuine smile forming on her lips. They walked hand in hand down the tree-lined streets to the neighborhood park, where the fair was in full swing. Conversations quieted as they approached, and all eyes turned to them. But they were not looks of pity or judgment. They were looks of respect. They saw Robert not as the untouchable magnate, but as a father. And they saw Lena not as the troubled girl Victoria's whispers painted, but as a child who had endured much and who was now, finally, safe beside the one who should protect her. Mr. Harrington was the first to approach, a warm smile on his face. "Robert, Lena, good to see you both." He looked at the girl and winked. "Your daisies look lovely." That simple act of normalcy broke the ice. Soon, other neighbors approached, greeting them, offering Lena a slice of cake, inviting Robert to join a game. The community, which had previously seemed like an audience of judges, now enveloped them in a warm embrace of acceptance. At the height of the fair, Robert went up to the small stage set up on the gazebo. He didn't give a long speech. He just took Lena's hand, which was by his side, and raised it slightly. "I just wanted to introduce you all," he said, his voice clear and full of unmistakable emotion, "to my greatest asset, my greatest pride, my daughter, Lena." A warm applause erupted from the crowd. In that moment, under the afternoon sun, holding her father's hand, Lena felt the last knot of fear and sadness unravel inside her. She smiled, a broad, radiant smile that illuminated her entire face. The manor was still there, the money, the businesses, the fortune. But here, in the middle of her neighborhood fair, surrounded by ordinary people, she finally found her true home. A safe place, built not on foundations of capital, but on the unwavering pillars of love and truth, where good, after many tears, finally prevailed with a sigh of relief.